Montana Territory, 1881. The wind cut sharp off the crazy mountains, and the snow packed tight along the ridges of the Gallatin Valley. Yates Prescott rode alone, reins loose in one hand, his face set in stone. He had not smiled in 5 years, not since the day his wife was laid to rest beneath a cottonwood by the creek they once called home. The land was quiet now, except for the creak of his saddle and the breath of his gelding. Yates had no reason to come down into town anymore, not unless he needed supplies or cattle feed. But today was different. He had promised to deliver a mule and cart to the widow Olivia Jensen, who'd lost her husband last spring in a flash flood that swallowed half their land. He had not planned to stay long. The Jensen place sat 2 miles east of Three Forks, tucked into a slope behind a stand of pine. The barn leaned hard to one side, patched with old boards. Smoke curled from the chimney, steady and clean. As Yates dismounted, the front door creaked open. Olivia stepped onto the porch, brushing her palms on her apron. She was tall, with copper-brown hair swept into a loose bun, cheeks pink from the cold. Her eyes held a kind of quiet grit that came from too many days spent surviving. "Mr. Prescott," she said. "Thank you for bringing the cart." He tipped his hat. "Not a problem." She stepped down, boots crunching over the snow. "I can pay you, not necessary." She hesitated, then nodded once. "You sure you will not come in and warm up? I made stew." Yates meant to decline. He did not do small talk, and he sure did not do warm kitchens and shared meals anymore. But then the front door banged open again, and a little girl charged down the steps, her arms flung wide. "Ma, you said we were going to have company." She had dark curls and boots too big for her feet. Her cheeks were round and rosy, and her smile lured it could split the sky. Olivia caught her gently by the shoulders. "Odessa manners." Odessa turned to Yates and tilted her head. "You brought the mule," he nodded. She stepped forward, inspecting him with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could pull off. "You look like a cowboy." "Are you a cowboy?" His throat worked. "I guess I am." She beamed. "You want to see my pony?" "He is not really mine, but I named him Buttons anyway." Before he could answer, she grabbed his hand. Her little fingers were warm inside his glove, and for a second, something stirred beneath the weight in his chest. Not joy, not yet, but something close. Olivia raised her brows. "You do not have to." She gets excited. "I do not mind," he said, and followed the girl around the side of the house. Buttons was a sway-backed gelding with a white blaze and a calm eye. Odessa climbed the fence and told him how Buttons liked apples and hated chickens. Yates listened, one hand resting on the rail. He did not speak much, but the girl filled every silence like she was born to do it. Later, when the stew was hot and the wind howled outside, Olivia brought him a bowl and sat across from him at the table. "You do not talk much," she said gently. "Nothing worth saying." She looked at him a long moment. "You lost someone," he nodded once. "So did I," she said. Her voice was quiet. "My husband drowned trying to get the wagon out of the river. We had just planted the spring wheat." He looked at her hands, the way her knuckles were raw from cold and work. "You running the place alone?" "Just me and Odessa. Neighbors help when they can, but I do most of it." He nodded again. There was respect in his eyes now. "You are strong." She gave a small smile. "I have to be." That night, after he had fed the mule and stepped outside to leave, Odessa stood by the door, hugging a ragged blanket. "Will you come back?" she asked. Yates stared at her. He had not planned to, but the words came out anyway. "If your mama does not mind." Olivia looked at him. "I would not mind." He rode home in the dark, heart heavier than it had been in years, but not in the same way. This weight was different. It was not grief. It was something warmer, something dangerous. Over the next weeks he came by again. Brought firewood, checked the barn roof, fixed the back door. He never stayed long. But every time he climbed into the saddle to leave, Odessa would wave from the porch, her mittened hand high in the air. Then came the night the mare foaled early, and Olivia sent for him in the snow. Yates came through the storm, coat soaked through, and helped the trembling animal birth a colt slick and shivering. Olivia worked beside him, sleeves rolled, hair falling loose. They did not speak much, just worked, hands steady, eyes meeting only when needed. When the colt finally stood, Olivia leaned against the stall, breathing hard. "You saved her," she said. Yates shook his head. "You did." She looked at him, and for a moment the quiet between them felt full, not heavy, just full. Odessa came bounding into the barn, bare feet in the hay, and threw her arms around him. "You came, Pa." Yates froze. Olivia's breath caught. Odessa laughed. "Mama said you always come when we need help, and Paul used to do that too, so I think you are kinda like him." Yates swallowed hard. His jaw worked, but no words came. Olivia stepped forward, kneeling beside her daughter. "Sweetheart." Odessa looked up. "Is that okay?" Yates stared down at the little girl wrapped around his legs. Then slowly, for the first time in 5 years, something broke loose in his face. His lips curved. His eyes softened. He smiled. And Olivia saw it, not just the smile, but the man he had been once. The one who had not vanished with his wife. The one who had just been waiting for a reason to come back. She rose slowly, brushing Odessa's curls from her face. Yates met her eyes over the girl's head. Neither of them spoke, but something passed between them then. Something that had not been there before, or maybe had been there all along. And for the first time in a very long time, none of them felt alone. Olivia stood at the sink, sleeves pushed to her elbows, hands plunged in cold dishwater. The day had slipped past without her noticing, sun glancing off the window pane, Odessa humming to herself as she stitched a crooked line of thread through a scrap of muslin by the fire. Outside, the snow had begun to recede in patches, revealing earth pressed flat by winter's weight. The ground would be too wet to plow for weeks yet, but the sight of it, the plain brown truth of soil again, stirred something in her chest. She heard the gate latch clack. Not loud, just enough to bring her head up. Odessa scrambled to the door without looking back. "I'll get it." Olivia dried her hands and followed slowly. Yates was already on the porch, hat in hand, his coat dusted with trail grit. He looked like he'd ridden through the far end of the valley and back again. "Afternoon," he said. Odessa was already tugging him toward the hearth, chattering about a bird's nest she'd found behind the barn. Olivia watched the way he listened, the way he knelt to see the little bundle of twigs she'd wrapped in a kerchief. "You've been out long," she said when Odessa ran off to fetch the nest. He straightened. "Drove some fence line for the Miller place, mended a break near the coulee. Thought I'd stop by, see how that colt's faring." "He's stubborn," Olivia said, folding her arms. "Doesn't like the halter. Tried to kick the pail over when I brought grain." Yates gave a low chuckle. Got his mother's temper then. She hadn't heard him laugh before. It wasn't much, just a short, dry sound, but it warmed the room more than the fire. She stepped aside to let him in. "You're staying for supper." He hesitated. "It's already cooking," she added. He nodded once and followed her inside. Later, with Odessa asleep in the loft and the fire banked low, Olivia sat at the table across from him. She poured a little more coffee into his tin cup. The silence between them edged with something steady now, something no longer uncertain. "You always live out that way?" she asked. "Since I was 21, he said. "Homesteaded a stretch near the river. Built the cabin with my wife. She liked the sound of water." Olivia didn't flinch. "What was her name?" "Clara." She waited. "She made quilts," he said. "Didn't talk much, but she'd hum when she worked. Always the same tune. I never knew where she got it." Olivia looked into her cup. Paul used to whistle when he chopped wood. Odessa still listens for it sometimes. The wind brushed against the window panes, soft as breath. Sometimes I forget the sound of her voice, Yates said. Olivia met his eyes. Sometimes I forget what his hands felt like, neither looked away. You ever think about leaving? She asked. He shook his head. Land's too much in my bones now, she nodded. Same. Yates leaned back, shoulders easing for the first time that night. You ever get help with the south field? Not yet. The ground's still frozen deep. I figure 2 more weeks. I'll come by when it's ready. She smiled, small and tired. That'd be a help. He stood then, slowly, as if unsure whether to go or stay. Olivia didn't rise. I can walk you out, she offered. He shook his head. You've been on your feet all day. She looked up at him, the lamplight catching in her eyes. You'll be back, if you want me to be. I do. He nodded once and stepped out into the cold. 3 days later, Yates brought a sack of seed oats and stayed to help repair the chicken coop. He didn't talk much, just worked beside Olivia in the clear morning light, sleeves rolled, arms flecked with dust and splinters. Odessa sat cross-legged in the grass, her doll perched beside her, watching as Yates braced a beam and Olivia hammered it in place. You two make a good team, she said. Olivia paused, glancing at Yates. He didn't look up. We do all right. That night, after Olivia tucked Odessa in and stepped out to the porch, she found Yates leaning against the rail, watching the last light fade behind the cottonwoods. He didn't turn when she joined him. She called me Pa again this morning, he said quietly. She misses having someone, Olivia said. I'm not him. No, she said, but she doesn't need him. She needs someone who stays. He looked down at his hands. I never figured I'd have another chance. She reached out and covered his hand with hers. Maybe you don't need a second chance. Just a new beginning. They stood that way until the stars came out, saying nothing more. The quiet between them held no sorrow, only the hush of something beginning, slow and true. The thaw came slow that year. Long veins of mud curled through the pasture, and the air carried the scent of wet bark and turned earth. Yates arrived on foot that morning, boots caked with clay, a coil of hemp rope slung over one shoulder. The cart tracks from the edge of Olivia's property were washed out, rutted deep by meltwater. She met him at the side gate, hair braided and pinned beneath a kerchief, a thin line of ash still under her fingernails from stoking the stove before dawn. Fence along the west side's come loose, she said. I started on it, but the boards are splintered through, he nodded, eyes scanning the slope. I brought a draw knife. Ought to be enough good wood in the shed to cut new rails. As they walked, Odessa trailed behind barefoot, dragging a willow switch in the mud, careful not to step on the early crocus blooms pushing up along the edge of the path. Ma says we can plant carrots soon, she said. But only if the chickens stop getting in the garden. Yates tilted his head. You tell them that yet? I tried. They don't listen. You got to negotiate with hens careful like. They're stubborn creatures. Odessa laughed, then ran ahead toward the coop, the switch bouncing behind her. At the broken fence line, Olivia held one end of the rail while Yates smoothed the split edge with the draw knife. His hands moved steady, the blade catching light as curls of wood fell at his feet. You always work quiet? She asked. Noise don't make the work go faster. She leaned her hip against the post. Sometimes it helps to talk, passes the time. I never was good at filling silence. I'm not asking you to fill it, she said. Just share it. He glanced up, expression unreadable, then bent again to the task. They worked until midday, sweat dampening the collar of Olivia's dress, Yates' shirt clinging to his back. When the last rail settled into place, she handed him a tin cup filled with water drawn fresh from the creek. You ever think about what you'd do if you weren't here? She asked. He drank, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I tried to once. Didn't take. She studied him a moment. I used to think I'd end up teaching. My mother taught in Bozeman before she married my father. I liked the feel of books. Paper, ink, the smell of them. Why didn't you? Paul needed help with the land, she said, and then it was just easier to stay. Yates nodded, then looked toward the foothills. You miss it? Sometimes, she admitted, but I wouldn't go back. Odessa's never known anything but this place. He crouched to gather the tools. She's got a strong way about her. She gets that from him. He met her eyes. She gets it from you. The words sat between them, unhurried and true. That evening, as the sky turned lavender and barn swallows cut low through the air, Olivia set a pot to boil and sliced turnips into a pan. Yates stood at the doorway, watching Odessa as she gathered wind-fallen twigs into bundles, her hands dirty, her voice soft as she hummed to herself. You'd stay if I asked, wouldn't you? Olivia said, not looking up from the stove. Yates didn't answer right away. Then, I'd stay even if you didn't, she turned. Why? Because it's the first time in years I don't feel like I'm holding my breath. Her hand stilled on the spoon. I don't want someone to fix things, just someone to carry them with me. I ain't here to fix anything, he said, just to stand beside what's already good. Later, when the dishes were washed and Odessa lay curled under a quilt upstairs, Olivia stepped out into the night air. Yates was already there, leaning against the porch rail, eyes on the stars. You ever think about what comes next? She asked. He didn't look away from the sky. I think about mornings, about waking up with purpose again. She stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth rising from his skin. I think about planting those carrots, about seeing her grow up here, strong, sure of who loves her. Yates turned then, slow and certain. She's got that already. Olivia searched his face, and this time when she reached for his hand, he met her halfway, fingers laced, palms worn and warm. They said nothing else, because nothing else was needed in the hush of spring's return. Two people stood side by side, not mending what was broken, but building something new. Not loud, not sudden, just real and ready and rooted deep. The last frost came and went, and the first planting day opened with a sky washed soft blue and a breeze that carried the scent of cottonwood sap. Olivia stood at the edge of the south field, apron hem caught in the wind, and watched Yates walk the furrows he'd harrowed 2 days before. He moved slow, with a rhythm that matched the land, deliberate, unhurried, certain. Odessa knelt in the dirt nearby, sticking carrot seeds into shallow trenches, her tongue caught in the corner of her mouth. She wore one of Olivia's old bonnets, the brim flopping over her eyes. You're putting them too close together, Olivia said gently. They like company, Odessa replied. I don't want any of them to be lonely. Yates paused and looked over. Then we'll thin them later. Olivia shook her head, amused. You're encouraging her, he shrugged. She's got a kind way of seeing things. They worked through the morning, breaking only to drink from the dipper Olivia brought out from the well. By noon, the field lay dressed in neat rows, and a pair of crows circled above, calling across the open sky. Afterward, while Odessa napped beneath the porch overhang, Olivia brought 2 chairs out into the shade and handed Yates a biscuit she'd saved from breakfast. He took it without a word, brushing the flour from his fingers. You ever think about marrying again? She asked. He didn't answer right away. He broke off a piece of the biscuit and looked out toward the far fence line. I used to think I'd worn that part of my life out. And now, I wonder if maybe I didn't, he said. I never thought I'd sit still long enough to find out. She leaned back in her chair, boots crossed at the ankle. I've had folks come by this place over the last year, men looking to help out with the land, thought they'd be doing me a favor, never asked what I needed. Just what they could take on. I'm not here to save you, he said. You never needed saving. She looked at him then, her face unreadable. "I was just making sure you knew that," he nodded once. "I do." That night, after Odessa was tucked in and the lanterns were trimmed, Olivia stepped into the barn with a bowl of mash for the colt. The animal nickered softly when she came near, pressing his nose into her shoulder as she set the bowl down. She scratched behind his ears, then turned to find Yates leaning on the stall gate. "You always come out here this time of night?" he asked. "Helps me sleep," she said. "Quiet's different in here. Feels like it listens." He stepped inside. The air smelled of hay and old wood, warm with the breath of animals. He stood close, not touching her, but near enough she could feel the heat of him. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About staying." She kept her gaze on the colt. "You already come by near every day." "Not for that," he said. "I mean truly staying." She turned to face him, arms crossed lightly. "You'd give up your land." "I'd sell it to the millers. They've been after that creek bend for years." "It's good water, better for their herd than mine," her brow furrowed. "And you'd live here if you'd have me." She stepped closer, heart slow and heavy in her chest, like something sacred settling into place. "What about Odessa?" "She's already got a place in me," he said. "That happened without me trying." Olivia reached up, fingers brushing his jaw, rough with stubble. "And me," he leaned into her touch, eyes steady. "You never had to ask." She rested her forehead against his, breath mingling in the stillness. Then she pulled back, just enough to look him full in the eye. "You don't owe us anything, Yates." "I know," he said. "That's why it means something. I'm not here to fill a space. I'm here because this." He looked around the barn, toward the house, toward the porch where a little girl now slept. "This feels like a life I want to belong to." She smiled, not wide but sure and quiet, like something long kept inside had finally found its shape. "Then stay," she said. And when he nodded, it wasn't a promise. It was a beginning. The first summer rain came before dawn, a soft pattering against the roof that pulled Olivia from sleep. She lay still, listening. The rhythm was different now. For the first time in years, there was another breath beside hers in the quiet hours. Yates slept on the far side of the bed, one arm resting above the covers, his palm turned toward her like he'd reached for her in sleep and forgotten to pull back. She rose carefully, tucking the quilt around Odessa where she lay curled up in the corner bed, drowsing through the sound of the storm. The child had insisted on sleeping in the main room that night, claiming the loft was too hot. Olivia hadn't argued, she hadn't minded the company. In the kitchen, she lit the fire and set the coffee to boil, the smell of rain mingling with dry wood and the faintest hint of last night's bread. She didn't need to wake Yates. He'd stir when the scent reached him. He always did. Outside, the fields were already soaking. The south plot would stay too wet to work for a day or two, but the timothy grass along the creek would grow tall from this. She leaned against the doorframe, watching droplets gather on the porch rail. Behind her, the floor creaked. Yates stepped in without a word and stood beside her, his shirt wrinkled from sleep, hair still tousled. "I forgot how the land smells waking up wet," he said. She handed him the tin cup she'd just poured. "You forget a lot when you stop living in it." He sipped, then glanced at her sidelong. "I never stopped. I just lost the reason to care." Olivia didn't answer. She didn't need to. Some things were already understood. Later that morning, while Odessa picked wild mint near the stream, Yates and Olivia went over the ledger she'd kept tucked in the kitchen drawer. He ran his finger down the rows, stopping at a figure she'd circled. "You're short on seed for the upper patch," he said. "I was going to trade eggs at the mercantile. It's not enough." She folded her arms. "I've made do before." He looked up, steady. "You don't have to anymore." She studied him, then nodded once. "We'll go into town tomorrow." They did. The road into Three Forks was still muddy in places, but the wagon held steady. Odessa sat between them, clutching a basket of eggs wrapped in cloth. She asked questions the whole way, about everything from how long it took to build a church bell to whether ducks ever got lonely. At the mercantile, Yates traded a small pouch of nails and a wedge of cured fatback he'd brought from his old place. Olivia bartered the eggs for molasses and a bolt of muslin. They left with more than they'd planned. Enough seed for the upper patch, a tin of licorice for Odessa, and a pair of boots for Olivia that actually fit. On the ride home, Olivia kept glancing at Yates when he wasn't looking. He fit beside her like he'd always been meant to. Not as a shadow to Paul, not as a replacement to fill a hollow, but as a man who'd come to know her as she was and loved her for it. That night, after Odessa was asleep and the house had gone still, Olivia stepped out to the porch where Yates sat sharpening a blade by lantern light. She lowered herself beside him, the board still warm from the day's sun. "I saw you talking to the preacher today," she said. He nodded. Asked if he'd come out next Sunday. She waited. "For what?" Yates set the blade down. "To marry us." She blinked. "You already asked. I figured if I waited, I'd start wondering if I had the right." He looked at her then, quiet and certain. "I know I do. If you want me." All the air seemed to still around her. She reached for his hand, settled it in hers. "I want you to come home every night to this porch. I want Odessa to grow up with your steadiness in her days. And I want to wake beside you until we're too old to lift fence posts." He kissed her then, slow and reverent, his hand against her cheek, his breath warm with the scent of mint and coffee and rain. The preacher came that Sunday. Neighbors gathered under the cottonwoods, and Odessa wore a crown of wildflowers she'd woven herself. Olivia stood barefoot in a linen dress, and Yates wore his cleanest shirt, sleeves rolled once at the cuffs. They said their vows with hands clasped, eyes locked. No embellishment, no flourish, just words meant and kept. Odessa clapped when they kissed, then promptly asked if that meant she got to call him Pa all the time now. Yates crouched to her level and said, "You always could." By summer's end, the fields lay golden with grain, the chickens stayed out of the garden, and the colt had taken to following Yates like a dog through the pasture. Olivia's laughter came easier. Yates spoke more, though never more than needed. And Odessa grew taller, sun-browned and barefoot, stitching her childhood into the land with every step. They slept each night with the windows open, air thick with crickets and the scent of hay, their arms wrapped around each other like roots holding fast to earth. And when the wind came down off the mountains again, heavy with the promise of snow, they did not brace against it, they welcomed it, knowing they'd weather it together. Their home held a fire that didn't go out. Their love, once quiet and hard-won, burned steady and sure, the kind that didn't need to be spoken every day to be known. And so they lived not in the shadow of what was lost, but in the light of what they'd built, together, always.